that point, you should not leave your chairs, your benches, and the place where you are, because we will take a giant selfie. So, you'll have to stay where you are, and we will be on that selfie too. We will just turn our back to you, and this will be our memorable selfie shared with all of you. Okay? All right. So, we are going to discuss, the two of us, the theme that is up there, which is the future of work. And clearly we come from a different background. You are an amazing young entrepreneur. You started a few years ago.
Yes,
I started many years ago. And that's okay.
You more experienced.
Oh, you're really so kind. Thank you so much. Let me start with the first question that I'm dying to ask you, because I have two sons, and one has started his own startup and the other one wants to start his own startup. What do you think is needed these days for a successful startup to stay successful? And let me give you, by way of background, a little bit of information. If you look at the top 20 companies of the Dow Jones 20 years ago, you would have found many oil companies, quite a few energy companies, a few pharmaceutical companies as well, but none of the IT companies that are today, all the big ones, the big names that you can think of, now in the top 20. Whereas these old oil companies, energy companies, have disappeared, except one or two. I think Exxon is still in the top 20, Pfizer is still in the top 20, all the others have gone. So, because you will be in the top 20, and you want to stay there as soon as you're there. Yeah. Come on, Zaky,
because in our industry there is a joke.
Yeah.
It's who gonna last next year, something like that. Yeah. And we as a leader have to understand it, because it's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's like we have a paranoia, because in next year are we still access, something like that. So we have to do anything.
Okay, so that's exactly my point. What do you do to be here next year and the year after and in 20 years' time?
I think the adaptability, because the startup actually means we as a company have to adapt to change. We have to be as agile as possible as a company to adapt to change. Because once you big, usually the company is very, very hard. You become a dinosaur. Yeah, and in startup, you cannot do like that. We always think that we are still startup. We, for example, like the first one, the culture, we have a freedom of culture. We empower everyone to be a CEO. CEO is not like me. You are the CEO. You have to live by your own. You have to do things that make impact. If you have idea, let's execute it, something like that. And the team empowerment is very, very important. We are not like bureaucratic, because bureaucratic kill a company. That's our new credo, because if you bureaucratic, then you gone next year, I believe. Because it's very hard to adapt to change. You have to open to new ideas. Even at the first time when you hear it wrong, it is wrong. But once you execute it, oh, I'm wrong as the CEO, you're right, something like that.
So you empower all people in the company to come up with their ideas and to explore ideas. Not all ideas are great. Some of them are dead on arrival, some of them are dead after 6 months. How do you filter what is going to work, what is not going to work?
We have kind of metrics. Everyone have like metrics. If the one that they executed fail, the metrics is there, right? We kill it as fast as possible, something like that.
Within what period of time do you say we have to kill it, or we have to?
I think 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, it's okay. So the idea is, everyone have idea, and let's execute it. Open to any ideas, because right now the idea that we executed today maybe is obsolete in the next 3 months because the world is changing very, very fast right now.
Is that why we get updates on our telephones and applications all the time?
Yeah, something like that.
Does that also, I mean, the agility that you refer to, does that require that you invest a lot of your budget in innovation, for instance?
Innovation produced by the people. We invest a lot in people.
Okay, does that mean that somebody who comes up with an idea that is not killed within 6 months is going to get a big bonus? Or is he going to get additional training? Or is he going to have more empowerment to develop his ideas?
Yes, even our salary is a little bit higher than oil industry. And I mean, because the biggest asset right now actually is the people who do the innovation. We also give not trying to promote, but I give it, for example, like we give like free lunch and free dinner in office.
Okay, who wants to be hired by Zaky?
No, that's
no,
sure.
Nobody, no hands up. Yes, there they come. Okay, you have a majority of girls actually. Yes. How many women do you employ?
Yeah, I think we try to do 50-50, but right now the number is around 30. Yeah, but we provide lactation room.
Okay, now I'm going to ask Zaky what he does, because I think that's a really important point for the Indonesian economy. Because many of you, I'm sure, know that the participation rate of women in the Indonesian economy is much smaller than that of men. And while there has been progress, you're still at about 51%. So 51% of the women participate in the economy, whereas about 81% of the men participate. By choice or by necessity, we don't know. But that gap is a significant potential growth, wealth, value contribution for the country. And there are policies that can help to improve those numbers and to offer women the opportunity to join, to be entrepreneur themselves, or to be employee in a company. Now, Zaky, I know, has policies in place in his company that are very positive for that. So, can you explain to us what you do?
Yeah, we provide some, for example, like lactation room and daycare. So they can
daycare
put,
centers, how does it work?
They put the children in the room, and then we have like hired staff so they can work focus. And also we support like remote if you more convenient in working from home and raising kids, it's okay. We also support that. Yeah, this kind of because with the rapid change of technology, actually the tool is there. We can have Skype, we have WhatsApp even, if you can call and video call anytime if you need communication, something like that. So place is not a barrier anymore right now. So as a mom, you can work from home also.
That's impressive.
I think I have to ask you something.
Yeah.
The topic is the future of work, and maybe in our field we always get AI, artificial intelligence will take over the world. Even we also invest in AI. How do you think is what kind of jobs that do you think is not exist, and how does this affect Indonesia or in youth? Because Indonesia, as far as I know, is we have the largest percentage of youth. We always mention about bonus demography, but I myself worry this is going to be a disaster demography maybe. So what do you think? What's your advice to youth in Indonesia?
First of all, I think that what you mentioned, artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum computing, big data, Internet of Things, you combine all of that, and it's really transforming and will continue to transform more and more the way in which we communicate, we work, we move around, we relate to money, we relate maybe to, our place in societies. So for all those reasons, we need to be able to constantly adjust. And the point you made about agility, I think, applies to our brain capacity. And it's going to rely very much on the professors, the educators, the rectors, the vice-rectors, all members of the academic community whose passion and mission in life is to prepare all of you to have this agility, this capacity to adjust, this capacity to move from one field to the other, and to understand languages that maybe you, and certainly me, were not born with. By that I mean there will be new fields that will have to be part of the curriculum. I was asking some of the professors in another institution of high reputation, as well as UGM, what is important? And that dean said they will all have to be plurilingual. So I said, well, what do you mean by plurilingual? Because in my days, being plurilingual meant, okay, you speak one or two or three other languages in addition to yours. I said, no, it's that. But it's also the ability to talk with computers, to have the ability to code and to participate in the process and be able to not just load applications, but write and really be in that language. So I think the curriculum of today may look a little bit different, and I hope sooner rather than later. And I'm saying that with humility because I'm the daughter of professors, and I know how passionate missionaries as well as conservative professors can be. But I think they will have to, not all of them, but many of them. There are a few here, so I have to be careful. But I think that's a very important component of how you equip the extraordinary asset that a country like Indonesia has. Because I share your view. I think it's a blessing, and it's called a demographic dividend. But it can also be a curse, because if that extraordinary potential is not equipped, suited to adjust to tomorrow's world, they will fail. Not you, because I think your brain is already prepared. You have the capacity to adjust, you're focused into the future. And you probably are these plurilingual individuals that I was talking about. But others who do not have the luck that you've had to be in a great university will be disenfranchised, will be lost, will be, prey to funny learnings, to funny propaganda. And that is not healthy, and that is not helpful for a society. So I think the training by universities, by schools will be important, but the constant lifelong training is also going to matter. Because as you just said, what is working today will be changed tomorrow. And what has worked for the last 3 or 4 years of your educations, which will help you get the job you want, maybe in 5 years' time will not be adequate anymore. So you will have to constantly be in training throughout your life. So be prepared to change jobs, positions and fields of operation. But be prepared to also continuously open your mind to new skills and new tools. I think that's how we can avoid the curse and get the blessing.
Can you specify what kind of jobs maybe? Because I understand you have more experience in the world, looking in every country, and you have visited Indonesia 5 days, right? How do you see Indonesia, and what is the potential of Indonesia? What kind of jobs do you think?
What I find extraordinary, first of all, since my first visit to Indonesia almost 20 years ago, the country has changed enormously. I know everybody complains about traffic jam, but it was a lot worse. There were fewer cars, there were more bicycles, mopeds, not so much bicycles, mopeds and motorbikes, but the roads were not what they are today. Okay, so yes, continue complaining, continue pushing and challenging authorities, but bear in mind that there has been improvement. The penetration of internet, not enough, needs to go further, more, and cover and be more, give better coverage, but it's a major improvement and it has changed life, and I'll come to the point that I want to make in a second. I think the fact that at this stage of development the country has no issue with power is something which is also a big plus. And clearly the banking and financial sector is many times stronger, better, and more resistant to potential shocks. And there are governance review and fight against corruption that did not exist 20 years ago, which I hope will continue as they have been initiated recently. Now, I have two numbers in my mind about Indonesia. One is 17,000 islands. The other one is over 1,700 startups in Indonesia. Indonesia is the fourth largest nation when it comes to counting startups. Now this is quite incredible because, given the size, given the spread, given, in a way, not sufficient internet access yet, it's amazing that that vibrant entrepreneurial sector has been developed as it has. So I would say that those are major processes for the country that I have observed and that I'm very impressed with.
Does that mean we as a young generation have to run a company, or?
I don't think it's going to be specifically for Indonesia. I think the work, the nature of the work itself is changing and will change. Now you ask me, what jobs will there be? I think it's what work will there be more than what jobs will there be. I think you Rector, you were making that point. He's not listening to me, he's looking at something far more interesting on his iPhone. You were making the distinction between jobs and work, and you were saying that people will have a work, will have an occupation, not necessarily a job, and I think you're right. Because if you are to believe studies, whether you look at the McKinsey studies, the Oxford University studies, all the big accounting firm studies, they all say the same thing. In the US, for instance, the conclusion is that at least 60% of today's job will be 30% automated and robotized. If you look at the Oxford University study, they'll say that two-thirds of the children of today will have a job that is not yet invented. So the jobs of tomorrow, I can't tell. I don't think you can tell. We probably can guess what it will require in terms of frame of mind, ability to adjust, comprehension of the new technological tools. But what exactly will there be? I don't know. When we stopped using candles many decades ago, nobody knew how many people would be employed in the electricity generating power industry. And yet today the numbers are staggering. It will be the same in the future, except, in my view, and that's the big change compared with last century or even decades ago, it will move fast. Which is why your point about agility is critically important. Let me ask you one thing. I told you that my parents were professors. Your parents must have had an occupation. How differently from you were they working? What did you see as major difference between the way you operate, including in your personal life, your professional life, and the way they operated?
Your parent is a professor. My parent is also a teacher. My parent is teacher. Yeah, same. But teacher of SMP. Same I think it's same. But yeah, when in my teacher era, I think there were no less tools, less choice also. In our era, I think we have so many choices right now. Even we confused, right? We have so many choices. We have so many news, even hoax, something like that. Tools, yeah, you can choose whatever you want. You can watch any kind of video from A to Z. So the old generation, or in my parents, I think my parents always mention about commitment. For example, like if my parents want to meet a person, they don't have a mobile phone, right? They don't have mobile phone. They have agreement. Hey, I have to meet in this place and a certain time. They have to come out. They cannot decline. I mean, they cannot cancel it because you don't have a mobile phone, right? Yeah.
Do you think that gave them a stronger sense of contract, the commitment, the engagement?
Yeah, they more engaged. They more commit because they don't have choice, something like that. But our generation, we have more choice, but somehow less commitment, something like that. Somehow less. I mean, the quality accept someone who can clean this choice, and they focus on this one choice, and then they go straight and forget this. I mean, they choose the best one of so many choice, because it's like a flood of information, flood of choice. I think that's the challenge for our generation, and differentiation of in my parents' era and in my era. My era challenging because we have so many things. Even it's very hard to.
Would you agree with me that because of that, it makes education even more important? Because from the multiplicity of sources of information, of data, of knowledge that is accessible, if we do not have the ability to question, to doubt, to select, then we are, falling prey to anything that comes, including fake news, including, questionable views.
Yes, I think education play a bigger role, and the government also, I think, have to play a bigger role, because it's like everyone can do anything, right? We have to select the best one from this lot of tools.
Okay, that's a really interesting point for me. I'll tell you why. Because I was a member of government, and I was in the policy-making business. And prior to that time, I was in private practice, and I was a business person. And when I was Minister of Finance, many entrepreneurs would come to me and say, don't do policies, don't do anything, just stay out of my way, and let me operate the way I want. And I find it extraordinary and welcome that somebody as successful as you, as innovative as you, will say, well, we actually need the government to do certain things. So what would you give them as priorities? Not necessarily the Indonesian government, but any government in a country where you operate. What do they need to do?
I think kill the unimportant one. Yeah, because so many. If you look at the news, you look at the tools, so many tools that right now you can use. The government should kill this something that unimportant and not useful for everyone. I think. Filtering, screening, something like that.
Would you mean filtering and screening what is fake, what is not right? Or would you mean sort of identify what is going to be most useful for the development of the country?
Yes, find most useful and then promote them to everyone, something like that.
And then we let everything else, but at least they can identify the priorities.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, if ever I become a policy maker again, I'll know what to do. So, thank you. I want to ask you something, because I'm concerned about my children. My children are your age, a little bit older actually. And I fear that because they watch people like you, they watch Elon Musk, they watch the big successful entrepreneurs, I fear that they will assume and regard as their inspiration and their role models people who succeed very quickly, who make money in next to no time, who after 2 or 3 years of starting up become millionaires. What's your take on that? What should I tell them? Because I think it's probably wrong.
Yeah, when I was opening Bukalapak, developing Bukalapak,
when was that?
8 years ago, 2010. I'm focusing on the impact. I mean, when I launching Bukalapak, what is the impact of the Bukalapak? Even at that time, we have no money. We don't have a characteristic of successful company. We have no money. I don't have MBA in Harvard.
Tell us where you went to school. He could have gone to UGM.
I don't have experience, or even my parents are teachers. So I have a characteristic of not successful company at that
Question:
time.
did they support you? Did they say, "Okay, try, go ahead," or did they say, "Oh, you should be a teacher as well"? Tell us.
At the first time, I don't let them know.
So you started behind their back?
Yeah, I think 4 years. After that, he showed me in the TV.
So then he found out.
Yeah, they found out that oh, you're running company. Oh, that's okay. A lot of money, something like that. But my point is, I think don't focus on money. Money is nothing. Money is a tool. It's an impact. We have focus on. Is it after what you are doing? I mean, you have to focus on your personal development, or passion maybe. What are you looking for? You have to know that. I think you have to know what are you looking for. If you look for money, when you got money, then you feel useless in the world, right? If you got money, then what? And I believe for UGM student, it's easy to get money. Yeah, Pak. I think it's easy to get the jobs done, but you guys have. I think you have to be grateful because only 1% who study in university in Indonesia. So looking for purpose and meaning is more important, I think. Then the money comes, and that term of successful.
How did you identify your passion and what you were going to? What was your driving force? Couldn't have been your parents.
I think your experience in since you were born, and then after that maybe you have a personal experience that very personal. Maybe that's can be passion and can be purpose. I myself born in Solo. It's a bit suburban of Solo, where everyone do small business. So many small business, and I saw so many small business have same condition when I was kid and until now. If I look up, the condition is same. The revenue of them is same. So it's kind of personal mission. So my mission have to help them, to empower them, to double the revenue with the technology. That's for me passion. It's related to or historical maybe. That's.
Do you think that's very Indonesian?
Sorry?
Is it Indonesia is a nation, and there is a strong feeling and sense that it is a nation, despite the fact that you have 17,000 islands. So this passion of empowering people, of helping them move up, is this something that is shared by young Indonesians?
I think so. We have kind of social culture, especially Japanese. Japanese, if you don't meet people, if you don't help them, you feel failed.
Yeah.
It's not money. It's very personal. And I think if we work hard, based on passion, you don't feel stressful. You feel happy because it's like when you play something or guitar, music, or play football. It's something like that. It's a passion because we do it from our heart, and it making impact to everyone.
Okay, you once said that the development of online is actually offline. Now, when I read that, I thought, what is he talking about here? So, can you explain? You've explained to me, so I kind of understand what you say. But can you explain? Because I think it relates to exactly what you said: sharing, reaching out, moving into new frontiers, and helping people.
Yeah, right now Bukalapak think beyond the internet user, especially people in rural area. Right now we are developing something like warung, because we see warung is the connector of a neighborhood. It's actually community marketplace. Warung is like papa mama store, mom and pop store. So we buy things in warung. So imagine if we can connect warung all over Indonesia and then distribute anything to this warung with the technology. It's gonna be powerful, I think. That's what we are doing right now, and I believe this is the potential of Indonesia, because Indonesia have so many islands and then so many rural area, and we have a very strong social culture. Like I mentioned, when I live in village, we are very social. We're meeting people, we buy in warung, and then if we can empower warung, and it's not just warung is not just a commerce place. I think it's a community place. So the next step can be maybe it's possible for us to giving them like education or empower them through help, something like that. It can be used for anything, I think.
So that's a way to infiltrate the network into communities that so far did not have access.
Yeah.
And through that network, then you can channel anything.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, and I think, for example, like logistic. Also, we have an unfair world, because in rural area, usually the logistic doesn't work, right?
Right.
But actually, rural area produce agriculture. For example, they produce agriculture. I think why not, if they produce agriculture to the urban area, why not the logistic is working
back and forth?
Yeah, back and forth. So it's more efficient, basically. So once we give product to rural area, and then we get the farmer, we gather the farmer and bring back the product. So it's really fast and it's more efficient, I think, compared to before with the technology.
Sure. No
Yeah.
ways.
That's what we do right now. But it's still experiment. Like I said, no one knew in next year it exists. The idea it can be failed. So we always feel curious about the new things.
Do you provide credit?
We provide, but through partnership. We begin to banking and financial institution. Hey, please give them more margin, because I have so many small medium businesses. So give the margin to them, so the interest rate can be lower. Yeah.
So in a way, you disrupt that business model.
Not disrupt it. I think disruption is a wrong term. I think disruption happen because of inefficiency. So if we have an efficient solution, I think everyone will be happy. I think, for example,
you improve their business.
Yes, improve, not disrupt.
I can just imagine that shareholders meeting of a big bank, which is announcing that the dividends are reduced by 20%, but that's an improvement of the business. I think you're right, by the way. I think you're absolutely right, but they'll have a bit of a time to convey that message. But you're completely right.
I want to ask you a question about, we have an investment from outside Indonesia in Bukalapak. This investment is really depend on the macroeconomics. Our worry as founders, I think other founders is also when the bubble comes. something like that. Is it always worry because sometimes bubble coming, and what do you think? Is it going to come, or are they late, or I don't know? Is it take long? What do you think of this macro of the world, or especially in Indonesia?
I think the reason we are all apprehensive about the bubble is the 2008 financial crisis, the big recession, which came as a major crisis in lots of markets around the world. The situation now is completely different. The fundamentals of the economies are stronger. The financial and the banking sector is certainly much reinforced with better capital ratios, with better supervision, better regulation as well. We're back now to a normal growth of about 3.9% as we forecasted, which is pretty much the average that we had prior to the financial crisis of 2008. The only thing that has changed, which is not a positive, which is that a lot of corporate as well as sovereign are more in debt than they were in those days. So I think that's an area where we need to watch, and where obviously monetary policies, financial tightening will matter, and for which policymakers have to be equipped to respond in case of shock. But we will see market adjustments. There will be corrections because it's the nature of the game. Trees don't grow to the sky, and we should expect that. We have seen it about 3 weeks ago. The markets have functioned properly. Financing is massively available still to this day, and the fundamentals of the economies are strong. So, market corrections there will be, but we are in a massively different situation than where we were back in the times of the crisis. Seriously. I wanted to ask you one thing, because you said that you invest in artificial intelligence, and we have at the IMF, we try to anticipate issues, and we believe that the issue of data, protection of data, sharing of data, access to data, lending of data is certainly an intangible value that needs to be better explored and better understood. Do you have, first of all, how do you deal with big data? And do you believe that some of the pioneers, the big, the Googles of this world, have such a dominant position that essentially case is closed and big data is going to be in the hands of a few companies, and they will be able to give or restrict access as they wish?
First of all, I think we believe in big data and the value of it, because right now we collect like so many data, and we study the data to improve the customer experience. But with the trend of cloud computing, so everyone moved to, for example, like Amazon or Google or Alibaba, and this trend is really interesting trend because everyone give data, right? But I think this is why I think the government is very, very important. They have an important role. I think more important role in technology, because they have to control it. Because someone can abuse this data or hacking, something like that, like the one that the Bitcoin in Japan is hacked by someone, and it's easier for maybe terrorists to get money. Maybe they can have a lot of hacker to hack, and data sovereignty is, I think, is inevitable, is very, very important for every country to control the data, control everything. Even I believe they need to analyze the data to have a better policy. And the AI itself, or the big data itself, have to be in the government hand. Of course, the government have to be competent, because by having, the problem right now is like chicken and egg, right? if we give data to the government, sometimes are you competent? We worry. You share to everyone. But if we have a competent government, we can trust them. It's like before the nation state, right? Everyone, we don't have state, right? Long before. The concept of nation state is everyone give rights to the state. It's like everyone give data to the state, and the state control the competent state. I think that's the future of big data lies on.
So policymakers, governments have to be involved. They cannot just.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because
and our impression is that it's not just a government, but it has to be a cooperation amongst governments, so that it's a shared framework.
Yeah, I think the keyword is supportive government. Yeah, government sometimes control, but they are not supportive enough. Sometimes they are very bureaucratic and take a long time to process. So if we have a very clean government, competent and really fast, I think that's very helpful for the player like us or you guys. Somebody, if you have a company working on company. Yeah.
There are governments actually which are moving in the direction of adopting digital government, and certainly we have a membership of 189 countries, and there are several countries where the entire government procedures are digital. I think of Estonia, for instance. Israel is another case, but Estonia is 100% digital.
Even I heard we can have we can be the member of the country, right? I heard.
Yes.
In Estonia.
Yes, that's right. That's
right
absolutely
now.
right. Yeah, you can become a national of Estonia, and you can apply, and you can sort of be digitally Estonian. That's true. But one of the benefits, I was discussing that with the former president of Estonia, the one who launched that and who saw the future. He was very visionary, this man. By the way, I asked him, why did you come up with this idea that government should be digital? And he said, well, that's because when I was 14, I had a math professor. And that math professor was passionate about computers. And although they didn't have a lot of money in those days in Estonia, the math professor was inviting passionate students in a little warehouse where they had 3 or 4 computers, the old ones that you have never seen in your life. And they were, coding and working and using Fortran and old languages that you have not heard of either. Maybe you have. Yes. See, the professors here on the first row, they have heard and they remember. I do too. COBOL, absolutely. So, because he was completely taken by these techniques when he was 14, he remembered that you could actually really change the way in which you conducted business, and he thought, okay, well, I'm now the president of the country, we need to include those tools, we need to use them. And I asked him, I said, well, how much did it cost you? And the new president, who's just been elected because he has now retired, said, oh, don't ask him, he won't tell you, but I can tell you. And it was 5% of GDP. Okay, so that's a significant investment for a period of time. But one of the results, because I asked him, I said, what's the outcome of doing that? He said, well, first of all, everything is transparent and available. So when we have a tender, when we have a procurement, when we have a tax audit, when things happen, change, business is conducted, everybody has access to it. And as a result of that, corruption has gone down to the ground. Now, not to say that it is perfect, nobody is perfect, and no country is perfect either, but it's a massive inducement to proper governance, proper behavior, and fight against corruption. So, digital can be good in policy making as well.
Yeah, I think it's true, it's really true, but the challenge may be sometimes the government also not ready, because the government usually led by, sorry to say, old generation. I mean, yeah, they have to adopt the new generation, especially the young engineering. They have to be smarter than the player, I think, because you are the referee, right? You cannot, the company or the player cannot be smarter, I think. The government have to be smarter than the player, and they have to invest. They have to invest and invite this talent, even hire them a higher salary to control this player for the future. Yeah, for example, like Bitcoin, something like that. That's. By the way, what do you think of Bitcoin?
See, the master of ceremony is looking at me saying, stop, 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 stop. It is true. But what I think of it, I'll tell you in a nutshell. I think it's a very innovative technology that is being used, distributed ledger technology, okay? And that will be used in multiple areas, not just about the creation and transaction based on new currencies. I think the fact that these currencies are not transparent, cover up all sorts of very strange trades, is a big alert to us that there should be a regulatory framework, there should be enough control so that this innovation is not conducive to money laundering, financing of terrorism, financing of dark trade. Most of you have heard about Alphabet, right? The holding of Google. How many of you have heard about Alphabet? Wow, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. Because that was a very dark trade that has been eventually defeated by, long-standing, discreet US investigations. And where, they managed to actually kill very illegal trading that was operating in the dark web, and where clearly the currency of that was favored was Bitcoin. So I think that's it. We shouldn't kill innovation. We shouldn't condemn it. We shouldn't say that it's here to go. But I think that we should really understand the complexity of it and the dangers that it can cause. Now I want to ask you a last question before Master of Ceremony takes over, because he looks more and more annoyed with me. Because everybody is interested in jobs. What would be your conditions and the qualifications that you expect from any of those smart students before you decide to hire them?
There is two dimensions. This is the first one, the most important, I think, attitude. Attitude for learning, I think. You have to be humble to learn something, because sometimes this is a kind of paradox of smart people, Yeah, right. Smart people usually, I'm smart. I'm smarter than you. Why I hear you? Something like that. It's very hard being humble, but I think that's the most important skill in, especially what I see in the company. Usually the one who perform, who want to progress, is the one who humble. And the attitude is the keen to learn from anyone, even from driver, from everyone basically. So that's the first important traits. And the second, I think, the hard skill. Of course, like coding, logic, analytical thinking, communication. That's, I call them hard skills. Statistics. That's hard skill is also important. But the first one, I think, is attitude for so learning. To learn.
Attitude, humility, curiosity.
Yes.
Always willingness to open your mind.
Because like we have mentioned before, the world is changing really fast. Even I don't know right now. Maybe some of you guys use something like Snapchat, something like that. My generation don't use Snapchat actually. Yeah, right. Why you guys use Snapchat? It's new. We don't understand as maybe older you guys. We sometimes we don't understand why something like this happened. So the attitude to learn, to be humble is very, very important. Adapt to change. That's one of our culture also. Yeah, to adapt to change.
I think that's a great way to close our conversation. Now, Mr. Ceremony, am I allowed to announce our Instagram context, or do you do that?
We're already arranged the time, madam. So we're about to start the question and answer session first, and then after that you could announce
I've forgotten about
the
Q&A
sessions. So thank you, and sorry for interrupting anyway. And now I would love to
changing. It's not a question of having the right MBA. I mean, look at you, Zaky. You did not get a Harvard MBA. And it did not stop you from being extremely successful. So the ability to adjust, the skills that were just mentioned, whether it's coding, statistics, psychology. That's what I've heard many university deans or presidents recently tell me, that those were three focuses that they were asked to include in the curriculums by the business, whether it was startup companies or larger companies that wanted to compete with the startups. So if you go to some of the big sort of Ivy League US universities, they will tell you that any field that they teach, which is usually the passion of their students, whether it is music, whether it's theater, whether it is literature, whether it is history, whether it is math, is always associated with digital learning, coding, and it's become another language that is required. So that's what I can offer. But I would not discount the ability that each of us has to access knowledge, to access education. I'll give you the example of the IMF. We provide technical training on the net. We use MOOC. It's available, and we have teamed up with a good number of universities. But if you're an official from a government, you can become qualified in public finance management by taking our classes and our curriculum online without moving to Washington or sitting in a classroom, and yet have the same quality of teaching and the same attention by the trainers as you would if you were sitting in a classroom. And that, it applies across all fields.
Yeah, from me, I think I want to point out the entrepreneurship, madam, because I think...
Can you learn entrepreneurship?
I think it can be learned. It can be learned. At least learn, try and error. At least. I mean, there is a gap, I think, in Indonesia between if you enter UGM or if ITB test, it's very hard. It's very hard to enter ITB or UGM because the percentage there is, I think, 1%. Yeah, Indonesia is people, young generation, I think, is very talented. The problem is, I think, when they graduate, no jobs, no industry. We have very limited industry. I mean, core industry. Our industry is always agriculture. What else? Banking, and then mining, something like that. We don't have like technology or very research science industry like Germany or US. I think that's the job of entrepreneur. I call you guys to be entrepreneur, I think, because we need more entrepreneur to build our industry. And entrepreneur is right now, I think, urgent. What I mean by entrepreneur is not tukang bakso only one shop, but a big giant industry. You have to create industry, something like that.
Thank you for the answer. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we're running out of time, so I only accommodated one question, and that one is the one and the last question. So sorry. And as Madame Lagarde said that she has an important announcement, so please, Madame, to announce the...
Can I make a proposal that we take 3 questions, really quick ones, and we promise to respond very quickly?
All right.
Okay?
Thank you for the advice. So the second question is coming from the middle there, the lady with the veil. Please say your name following with the questions.
My name is Dian. I'm studying Japanese in UGM. My question is, why IMF choose Indonesia as the annual meeting in this year? Thank you.
Okay, super quickly. because Indonesia offered its candidacy, and we had a range of about 8 different countries that wanted to host the annual meeting, and we selected very seriously, even-handedly, considered all the applications, and Indonesia was the best.
Now, the last question is coming from here. Check.
Hello. My name is Ruth. I'm coming from Faculty of Social and Political Science. My question is, as a young generation, should we pursue our dreams and passion, or should we enhance our ability in practical skills for future employer? Thank you.
To me, I think it has to work both ways. You have to have passion and you have to have a technical skill. Quicker.
Alright, what a quick yet so interesting questions. Thank you, Mr. Zaky. And now, Madam Lagarde. Oh, alright, one more. Okay, so the last one is that one.
Hello, I think I have to be fast. So, my question is about public healthcare. So, Indonesia has a public healthcare called BPJS, and it has some various problems currently. And I would like to ask simply how AI could possibly help public healthcare in the near coming future, because we have discussed future of work and so on, and it's important as well, public healthcare. The role of AI.
Okay, I'm not a physicist, I have no knowledge about health, but I listened very carefully to some of the leaders in that field had to say. And what I understand from the various, particularly the use of Wharton, applied to oncology, for instance, using big data, harnessing the competence that have been deployed by thousands of doctors and oncologists in particular, actually enables artificial intelligence to produce a diagnosis without the involvement of an oncologist, with a 90% certainty of accurate diagnosis, and therefore can be used in countries where the skill set, the number of doctors or oncologists is not available. So I'm absolutely confident that if applied well, AI can actually not be a substitute, but be an immense tool to help with the health of people. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam, for the answer. And now we're going to announce about the